Come to order, please. Joining us for our second hour are Meaghan Murphy, Paul Dirks, and from the Vancouver Rape Relief and Women's Shelter, Hilla Kerner. Thank you for joining us. You have up to 5 minutes each for an opening statement, and we'll begin with Ms. Kerner.
Transgender people must live in safety and have the equal rights and opportunities that are promised to us all.
As a trans fucking person that's engaged in sex work, what is this place's fucking experience with organizing for solidarity?
Why are we listening to this person talk right now? Like, I don't understand.
A key problem with this bill is that it proposes to amend something as important as the Canadian Human Rights Act and the Criminal Code in order to include something that isn't even definable. According to Justice Canada, gender identity is defined as a person's internal or individual experience of their gender. But this definition misunderstands what gender is.
I'm a man. My ID say female, he's being rude. Know your pronouns. Know your pronouns.
Gender does not mean male or female, it means masculine or feminine.
No, you said sir. Once again, it's ma'am.
I actually said both of you guys. It was general.
Right beforehand, you fucking said sir.
Women and girls around the world are killed, prostituted, raped, and abused every single day, not because they wear dresses, have long hair, or behave passively, but because they are female.
I've talked to the organizers before multiple times. They told me that I'm not a real woman.
Things that exist for male use, to be owned, bought, sold, and looked at. Women's rights exist on this basis because we as a society understand that women are discriminated against and subjected to male violence regardless of their clothing, body language, or behavior, which is now apparently being defined as gender expression.
Sir?
Motherfucker, take it outside. If you want to call me sir again, I will show you a fucking sir.
I apologize.
Motherfucker.
I apologize now.
Women do not know they are women because they are born interested in high heels or the color pink. They know they are women because they are female.
And I spent all of Wednesday speaking to Morgan.
Excuse me? Okay, get the fuck out. Get out.
The idea that women could simply express themselves or identify differently in order to escape oppression under patriarchy is insulting and provably untrue.
No fucking TERFs in this fucking neighborhood!
Does this mean that women are raped because they look feminine? Does it mean that women are abused because they're too passive? You know, it's just a really, really dangerous path to go down.
The statistics are that voyeurism and exhibitionism are almost completely dominated by males, upwards of 98%, probably greater. I've personally gone through state sexual offender records. Sexual high-risk sex offenders are almost always male. Again, right around the 98% mark, but also fantasies of voyeurism. And Abel 1988 in his study and Templeman 1991 in his study show that males sometimes are, in the sample that Templeman had in 1991, found that 40% had engaged in voyeurism of males. That's a tremendous statistic. And in another study that Templeman cites, that upwards of 40% had fantasized about voyeurism and others about pedophilia and rape. These are criminal patterns that do not exist amongst women.
There is something fundamentally different about a male's sexual power over a female, even if that male is presenting as a female.
I love milk and where it comes from.
I talked before about the cotton ceiling and how trans women say that if lesbians do not consider sleeping with them, then we're transphobic, we're bigots, And I'm still pissed about it. But the shit got worse.
A trans woman's identity as a woman would be respected within the lesbian community up until the point of a romantic or sexual relationship was being considered, at which point the lesbian would say, sorry, not interested in trans women.
So a relationship wasn't being considered then?
If you don't view trans women as women, regardless of their operative status, you don't actually think of trans women as women at all.
Woman is defined as an adult human female. Female is defined by her sexual reproductive organs. A homosexual is defined by their attraction to the same biological sex.
You can't just say, well, it's only in relationships that I'm not attracted to you.
I'm a woman since a year now, and I'm a lesbian, and I was married most of my life with a woman, and therefore my penis is female too. So there is no reason for a lesbian to not have sex with me.
Like a lot of lesbians, I have a justified poor body image.
Or maybe you're a man.
Why would a man pretend to be a lesbian?
To get some nookie off a pretty but stupid lesbian?
If you accept the mantra trans women are women, lesbianism doesn't exist.
The biggest criticism of the cotton ceiling is that you can't tell me who to be attracted to.
Trying to shame lesbians for being lesbian is obviously intrinsically homophobic and misogynistic. Indeed, we're not seeing trans women targeting heterosexual men.
And so a lot of people say, well, I'm just not attracted to transgender people.
It's to do with the fact that you're male.
I'm going to keep on making videos about the cotton ceiling because fuck everybody else.
It's not a lesbian's job to fuck you. That is rape culture.
And I'm a woman, and if they do not want to have sex with me, that's trans misogyny. They're bigots, and they should goddamn die in a fight. Sorry.
A grown man who is actively exploiting women is able to identify as a woman and enter women's spaces. Females are a globally oppressed class in and of ourselves. If we created civil rights and legislation around women or womanhood simply for the sake of allowing anyone to enter the group, including trans women, we would be ignoring the fact that when they were busy shoving their dick into all of my orifices and I was risking pregnancy and they were not, I was having sex with a man. I was being raped by a man. I was having intercourse with a man. I was not having sex with a woman. Those experiences have stayed with me my whole life, and it's not going away just because of the way that someone identifies themselves on the inside.
If lesbians keep doing this and saying that I'm not a woman and that my penis is a male organ, then they're asking for trouble. Me and my trans friends, most of us have a job in IT. We know how to track them down, and we can make their lives miserable. We can dox them, but I don't want to go there. I just want to be accepted and one of the girls and girls' night out and to the movie girls' night out, and then afterwards, well, maybe sex, and yeah, that's all I want.
Trans women are in men's prisons, and what have you done for them? What have you done for women?
Having a uterus and a vagina is not just some exclusive club for women who happen to be able to bear children and make babies that we want to exclude trans women from. It is a very real experience. Being raped and knocked up and forced to push out a child that you don't want and forced to breastfeed it, and if you're poor or if you're a woman of color, likely in America, living off of welfare and supporting the child off of welfare for its entire childhood and adult life, that is a reality. And that is how a lot of women are living. And that is not something to be ignored.
If anybody is having problems coming to terms with the fact that for heterosexual men, it's about sexual excitement, very important to look at this pornography. The title I like best is Gender Swapped by Aliens.
Contrapoints, like he online, like in terms of like I think Stickum sent me pornography before to like look at. It's like, is this porn, Nuke? I'm just not sure. Like, and now he identifies as woman. He's not a woman.
Now, am I right about the Playboy business?
Well, I keep saying, you know, I've got the time if he's got the money, so yes. My body wasn't cheap. I paid a lot of money for my body, so
right.
If he wants to pay, I'm happy to take my clothes off.
It's called feminization, sissification, bimbofication, and so on.
You are actually then capable of sexual intimacy with a man?
You come to my dressing room later, I'll show you, yeah.
Is she a she?
I'd like to know if you just post for these magazines and make these comments just to try to prove to yourself that you're a woman.
I don't have to prove to anyone or myself that I'm a woman. I am a woman.
I don't know what it means to feel like a woman. I know what it is to be a girl and to be a woman and the experiences and the feelings I have because I'm a woman.
I can really understand how a girl could develop rapid onset gender dysphoria if she were in a position where she was feeling sexualized and didn't want to be.
For many detransitioning women, we all share a commonality, which is the fact that we transitioned as a result of trauma.
I wonder, there are so many women in the world that are trying to escape being objects just because they're women. And here you come and get a sex change and become a woman just so that you can be an object. Now you want to be in Playboy just to be an object as a woman. How do you feel what service do you feel you're doing to the other women in the world who want to be women as people and not just as bodies?
I'm not doing any service.
You flirt more than anyone who was born as a woman that I've ever known.
Well, flirting is not necessarily a bad thing.
I was just talking about a show of intelligence. And other powers other than the sexual.
The transgender movement and the transgender politics that have developed this, what I call this men's sexual rights movement, because it is about their sexual rights to dress as women in the spaces of women.
I'm not doing any service to any women. I'm doing a service to transsexuals.
That they have the right to come out into women's spaces, into the world, and make women the enforced audience or participators in the fetishes.
I understand your point. It's very well stated. I think we have to at least respect her different agenda.
There's cross-age transgender pornography when men are transformed into 5-year-old girls and so on. Interestingly, on the covers of all of these books I found on Amazon, it was actual women and girls in the pictures. So these men are ambitious because there's no way they're going to look like 5-year-old girls.
At age 46, after 23 years of marriage and 7 kids, Stephanie realized she wasn't a cross-dresser.
You know, when you see a guy that's 300 pounds with a goatee who pulls in a Harley and is going through my closet and saying, can I wear this dress? Can I wear that dress? You know, or can I kiss you when I'm wearing the dress? I said, well, I don't mind going to 6, so I've been 6 ever since.
Many varieties of the transgender pornography. For instance, there's pregnancy transgender pornography where men pretend to be pregnant. There's lactation pornography when they're into trying to lactate themselves by the use of drugs or sucking milk from somebody else's breast. There's pornography in which clearly ladyboys from Thailand who've been trafficked probably and put on these drugs are having to lactate for other men's sexual excitement.
If he were a woman, he would not have done that to me. If he were a woman, he would not have ridiculed me in that way. If he were a woman, he would be like vulnerable in the way that I was in that interaction. He cannot become she.
Some of them want to get sexually excited by doing what they think are the avocations of women. So they might do knitting. I know it's very difficult for women to understand why knitting is sexually exciting, but if they do it, it is sexually exciting. What I'm saying here is not just my opinion. There's quite a large number of sexologists, one or two of whom were transgender themselves, who have written extensively about this. They're all men. And they came up with this term autogynephelia to explain why these men do cross-dressing. And autogynephelia means love of the woman in yourself. But what it does show us is where the huge surge in transgenderism is coming from. The men are reading this stuff, they're getting very excited, they want to go out and be able to be in the women's toilets and wearing this kind of clothing, and so on. So this pornography is, as I say, pretty clear. In the pornography, men have injections, or they take a pill, or they get forced somehow to become women, which is the lowest of the low. It would be a horrible thing, ejaculation.
If I started to feel like there were going to be biological males in my locker room, I would either find a different gym to go to or not go anymore.
One interesting example of this was a man who, in the women's toilets, would go up dressed as a woman to women and ask to shake their hands. Of course, women didn't want to shake his hand, but that would have been the money shot. A woman recognises him as a woman in women's clothing, in the women's toilet, shakes his hand. Wow! The problematic nature of the diagnosis of gender dysphoria is clear in the fact that not everybody can get it. There's just one or two, but basically heterosexual adult women don't get it because you don't get support groups for men whose wives have transgendered, you don't get special small-sized men's shoes or whatever it is, no special pornography. You don't get wives running up and down stairs in Y-front saying that their husbands need to have gay sex with them. It's not happening, right?
I believe this bill to be well-intentioned, and yet it puts women and children at risk of sexual violence, and perhaps more importantly, removes a woman's right of consent when it comes to her bodily privacy. Our campaign has done hundreds of hours of research on male violence against women in public spaces. We have logged 255 incidents of the sort that many people say do not exist. These are largely of voyeurism in spaces like unisex change rooms at pools, gender-neutral bathrooms, or in 29 cases, situations where males have expressed a female gender and perpetrated violence in women's safe spaces. Let me give you a few examples only from Canada. In 2012, Christopher, or Jessica Hambrook, assaulted 2 women in Toronto shelters. Darren Cottrell, in 2013, dressed as a woman and committed voyeurism in a women's washroom at Dufferin Mall in Toronto. In 2015, Xingchen Liu dressed as a woman and committed video voyeurism in a women's change room at Leduc Recreation Centre in Edmonton. Also in 2015, the University of Toronto faced a debacle when they were forced to reverse their decision to make many of their washrooms gender neutral when at least 2 women were victims of voyeurism while they were showering. We recently did a geographical analysis of these incidents. We compared the level of incidents per population in those regions which had gender-inclusive legislation, which those that did not. Regions with gender legislation were 1.8 times as likely to have these violent incidents against women than those without. All 5 of the regions with the highest incident rate per population were those with gender legislation, with Ontario being the second out of all states, provinces, and territories. Bill C-16 removes women's right of consent concerning their bodily privacy and overturns decades of jurisprudence on bodily privacy law. Target stores make for an interesting case study which corroborates this finding. It is well known that in April 2016, Target publicized its gender-inclusive policy. In the 13 months since, Target has experienced 8 incidents of sexual violence against women in the change rooms and washrooms of their stores. This was more than all other years combined. One of the most notable of these incidents occurred in July 2016 in Idaho. Shauna Smith, a trans woman, videotaped an 18-year-old woman changing. But not only do women have the right to be protected in their safe spaces, they have a right of consent concerning their bodily privacy in places like change rooms. Stanley v. the RCMP 1987 states, "We cannot conceive of a more basic subject of privacy than the naked body. The desire to shield one's unclothed figure from view of strangers, and particularly strangers of the opposite sex, is impelled by elementary self-respect and personal dignity."
An LGBT group has cut ties with tennis great Martina Navratilova after she said it was a form of cheating for transgender women to be allowed to compete in women's sport. New York-based Athlete Ally, which supports LGBT sports people, called the comments transphobic and removed the 18-time Grand Slam winner from its advisory board and as an ambassador. Navratilova wrote in the Sunday Times that it was insane that transgender athletes who decide to become female had achieved honors that were beyond their capabilities as men.
Men's tennis and women's tennis are completely almost two separate sports. So I'm like, if I were to play Andy Murray, I would lose 6-0, 6-0 in 5 to 6 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, because no, it's true. It's true. It's a completely different sport. The men are a lot faster, and they serve harder, they hit harder. It's just a different game, and I love to play women's tennis, and I only want to play girls because I don't want to be embarrassed.
It will be the end of girls and women's only sport if we make simply gender identity the basis for eligibility for girls.
Right, you'll have men's sports and you'll have co-ed sports.
We will make America fairer by passing the Equality Act to end discrimination against the LGBTQ community.
Something that has happened recently for Selena was being left out of the New England Championship. She was the first one out of the final and was the 8th one in the state. Since 2 first places were taken by boys who identify as girls, she could have been the 6th girl going, and instead she was a spectator on the stands at the New England Championship.
They took away the spots of deserving girls, me being included. No one thinks it's fair, but everyone is afraid of retaliation from the media, from kids around their school, from other athletes, coaches, school administrators. And they don't want to drag attention to themselves, and they don't want to be seen as a target for potential bullying and threats.
Watching them run was just heartbreaking. I mean, you almost don't even want to watch, but how can you not? You can clearly see these 2 biological guys just absolutely crushing it, and it almost brings you to tears.
What was the thought process when you took that fight with Fallon? Of course, all the controversy and whatnot, whether she should be fighting against women.
Oh man, there's an intense thought process. You know, at first I really had to ask myself morally if I thought it was right for her to fight. You know, I had to ask myself if it was the right thing for me to pull out of the fight. You know, and I had to ask myself what I would be doing for women's MMA if I actually fought her. And when it came down to it, it really was just a matter of I entered into that tournament knowing I was going to win, and she didn't come out until the semifinals. You know, it might be a different story if she would have entered initially and I would have entered initially, but I felt it right for me to stick out something that I already had my eyes set on, you know. And so I just kind of said, you know what, I don't care who's across the cage from me, even if it's a transgender fighter. This person used to be a man. You know, I had my eyes set on a goal, and I'm going to stick to it no matter what.
She has been competing in track and field since I introduced her to it when she was a little girl. And it's something that we share together.
With the case in Connecticut, it can be difficult showcasing my talents to coaches from around the country, as they only look at the results online. They see the first and or second place girl so far ahead of the rest of the girls, and they're going to reach out to and try to recruit. those two top girls versus everyone else since they're so far behind in time.
Definitely when her striking made impact on my face, I could feel, I got rocked, and she kind of hit harder than some of my guy teammates hit, and that to me was like, whoa. But, I felt technically I was a better fighter and I can get around being hit.
So I think it's gotten to the point where some girls are starting to stray away from those events and are hoping to go to other events so then they actually have a fair chance of winning. And in my case, I have my field event, long jump. That was my safe haven, if you want to call it, where the results were fair no matter what, because it was girls competing against girls. But now, unfortunately, one of those athletes has started to compete in long jump. So now none of my events are safe.
She doesn't go there to become second best. She wants to win. And when that is not even on the table any longer, what is the drive to do it?
Everyone kind of mistook my fighting Fallon as me saying, hey, Fallon should be allowed to fight women. But honestly, it was just a unique situation where, like I said, I had just entered the tournament, or had already been in the tournament, and then she came out, and I felt, you know what? This is my money, this is my title, and I'm not going to pull out for anything. Given that, I really feel like there should be a transgender organization, I don't feel like Fallon should fight dudes. I don't feel like she should fight women. I feel like there should be a unique organization for those needs, She did have an advantage. She definitely did. But I took the fight knowing that. And not every woman wants to go into a fight with the advantage. If someone asked me today, would you like to fight Fallon for one fight contract with this amount of money? I would say no, because I want to fight someone, and I think all other women want to fight someone that were born on the same playing field, an equal playing field. So part of me is sorry to say this, and I hope the LGBT community does not take this the wrong way. I just feel like there's too much of an advantage for her to fight against women.
It's frustrating when you know that you run your best, and no matter what, your best is never going to be enough.
So Maya, as a lawyer, what does it mean to change the law so that men can self-identify as women?
Well, there are two primary vehicles that are being explored right now. One is through Title IX. Title IX is a 1973 legislative act that essentially required all schools that receive federal funding, it prohibited them from discriminating against folks on the basis of sex. And so one of the ways in which the law is attempting to be converted is under the Obama guidelines that were issued last year. It basically reads into the prohibition against sex discrimination a opportunity to read that as gender identity, so as to say someone who self-identifies as male or female should be extended the same protections as someone born a woman. And what that means practically is that in the context of schools, in sports, housing, bathroom and locker room facilities, it would mean that individuals would have access to those facilities. However, the 1975, there was a case that Ruth Bader Ginsburg argued where Justice Kennedy essentially said that sex, like race, is an immutable characteristic. And what it means to be a immutable characteristic is that by no fault of your own, just by an accident of DNA, you are either born with melanin in your skin, like me as a black woman, or to be female with, or male with your sex organs, right? And that there is nothing that can mutate that. Well, what we know is that with the advancement of science and technology, those things are expanding.
Dear academia, if you expect me to actually say and to go along with trans women are women, a person can change their biological sex. If you actually expect me to go along with that, yeah, you can go ahead and kick me out now.
Another vehicle is through equal protection, and equal protection is the basis on which this notion of immutable characteristics first arose, and it arose to protect African Americans against race discrimination. One of the interesting intersections of the current pathway on transgender rights is that it particularly implicates issues of race. as you all may have been seeing in the news media, there's now a term called trans black or trans race that's being highlighted, particularly by the white woman Rachel Dolezal from the Northwest, who passed as a black woman leader in the NAACP, and now identifies herself as trans black or transracial. And so the implications in the law will serve to have some consequences both on the gender continuum, with the greatest consequence to the advancement of rights for women, but also have deep consequences on the advancement of people of color.
And what's your position on that?
Well, my concern is, how do we explore these rights for transgender folks in a way that does not undermine the rights of women or people of color?
If I don't drink the ridiculous, disgusting, nasty, I'm allergic to it ass Kool-Aid, then I'm a horrible person and a bigot and a transphobe. This professor actually compared the fact, tried to compare the fact and link the fact that I said that biological males with XY chromosomes are male and you can't change chromosomes. She tried to link that to the Orlando shooting. She essentially calls me a transphobic, homophobic, domestic terrorist in front of everybody. And I was expected to not defend myself. How are you going to tell me, how are you going to give me half a grade because I didn't source, literally, this is what she said, I didn't source the fact that XX chromosomes are female and XY chromosomes are male. Do I also need to source that the desert is dry? I thought some things were just considered common knowledge and we didn't have to source those. You don't need a reference for things that everybody knows. Fahrenheit is 32 damn degrees. Do I need to cite it?
Now, that we have technological advancement that mutate those things does not convert the biological realities.
Which we could say can even be, they can change skin tone, right?
We can change hair color, eye color, any of those things, right? One example that regularly comes up, particularly since so much of this debate is around bathrooms, okay? And it's really unfortunate that we're starting an entire national narrative around bathrooms because there's so many other issues that are at play. But let's just start with bathrooms. There are a lot of folks who say, well, by not allowing trans people to go into the bathroom of their gender identity is creating separate but equal facilities, okay? And they equate that to the separate but equal facilities that existed before the Civil Rights Movement, where we segregated bathrooms on the basis of race. To that I say, when bathrooms were were separated on the basis of race, it was done so purely for discriminatory purposes.
We heard in last week's testimony that in fact transgender people are more likely to be victims of crime than other groups.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. In 2015, the greatest survey done on trans individuals in the states surveyed 27,700 trans individuals across every state. They found that 1% of trans individuals were victims of sexual assault in bathrooms, and 0.6% were victims of sexual assault in bathrooms. It may be that there's overlap between those two numbers. I repudiate those kinds of incidents. They're horrifying, and yet one must be aware that 1.6%, even if you add those two numbers together, of a population that's 0.6%, so 1.6 of 0.6 is a very small group of people.
Get off this stage! We are here for peace, and it should be and be part of dialogue.
Men don't feel particularly threatened if a woman comes into a men's room. They might be annoyed or embarrassed, but they're not, if I walked into the men's locker room, they're not going to feel threatened. Whereas if a man walked into the locker room where I'm changing, I I would pretty sure have a panic attack.
100 trans women were murdered this year because of the hate that you promote.
I don't know what you're 1,600 women were murdered last year. Where are your voices about the 1,600 women who were murdered last year?
There is an entire industry, $1 billion industry, about gender reassignment surgery, drugs, hormones that block puberty, and secondary sex characteristics for children.
It's a huge money-making experiment on our children, where children as young as toddlers are being diagnosed as in the wrong body and taken to these gender clinics where they're first socially transitioned to live as a boy or live as a girl, live as the opposite sex, which I find that problematic too. I think children should be able to do whatever they want. Like what does it mean to live as a boy or live as a girl other than sexism? And then after social transitioning, when those children get close to puberty, they are placed on very strong drugs that suppress puberty. They're called puberty blockers. Those drugs have many long-term dangerous side effects that we already know about from children with other true disorders who'd been put on them in the past. And then once they hit young adolescence, and their peers are starting to go through puberty and they still have a child's body, that the pressure is to then give them cross-sex hormones.
And they're on this stuff for life.
Yes. If you give a child puberty blockers and then cross-sex hormones before a natural puberty, that child will never develop normally as the sex they are. They will be permanently sterile and they will be permanently dependent on synthetic hormones because their ovaries or testes never developed and cannot make their own hormones.
Can I interject?
Yeah, sure.
You know, one of the interesting things is I had the opportunity to work in the Ninth Circuit on the gay conversion therapy ban. And what's interesting to me is a lot of the arguments against gay conversion therapy are very much raised with this new medical approach of interrupting children's natural development.
Would you agree that anyone can commit voyeurism?
There exists amongst trans women certain criminal patterns that do not exist at all amongst women. So for instance, at the earlier part of this year, there was a sex offender, Antoine Nascathy, who was out on the loose in Vancouver, who was gender variant and sometimes identified himself as female. He was convicted for breaking into homes and sexually assaulting female residents between 2001 and 2009. It's an example of a criminal pattern that simply does not exist amongst women, where a woman would break into a home and perpetrate sexual violence against other women. Matthew, or as now known Madeline Harks, would be another example, where she has claimed to victimize 60 girls. So there's tremendous sex differences that need to be taken into account here. No one is saying that trans people are more dangerous, and yet there are patterns amongst trans women that do not exist amongst women.
Something else, have you computed the same kind of data as to the number of incidents that happened in sex-segregated spaces during that same period of time?
No, I don't have that analysis.
So we have no basis of comparison as to whether how many incidents happened in sex-segregated spaces during that same period of time.
Here's the relevancy, Senator.
No, would you just please, do we have that basis of comparison?
I've already answered. I don't have that basis of comparison.
Okay, and I have a last question.
But can I answer the question? Chair, can I answer the question?
Yes, I will ask my last question and then you can answer. I would also like to know whether we have a basis of comparison as to, in those same states or provinces, whether we can compare the statistics before gender legislation was adopted and after as to the number of incidents that happened.
Okay, thank you, Senator.
Go ahead.
To answer the last question first, I'm not certain that we have the amount of incidents. As you know, as probably most of you know, when you start to run studies, you need a certain amount of data to be able to do the right kinds of calculations, and that the less data you have, the less reliable, of course, your findings. So there is not the data to be able to do the kinds of regressions that you're asking for, although I would love for that data to be available. But the second question as to relevancy is absolutely key because of this, that in these spaces there's no way for a woman to know whether she is in jeopardy. Because when she's unclothed, if there is no way for her to know that somebody should be there or not. And so you've got examples of women being kicked out of women's shelters because they objected to having it. So in the Okanagan, BC, recently, 2017, being kicked out of women's shelters because they objected to having a male who identified as a woman in their space where they're unclothed. We've got all sorts of examples where people are being where there's these predators are getting in and being. I mean, we could multiply.
There always have been predators, and I would submit that your data is not scientifically reliable.
We'll have to leave it there.
The legislation that's being proposed, the Equality Act that's currently being proposed, I think it was passed by the House, now it's in the Senate. If that's passed, anybody can simply say, I identify as a man. They don't have to change anything about themselves. They don't have to, you.
You represent the Vancouver Rape Relief and Women's Shelter. Is this the same organization that was before the BC Court of Appeal in Nixon versus Vancouver Rape Relief?
Yes, this is us.
Yes.
Well, I assume people understand what the case that the senator is asking. No.
Yes, all the senators would. Yes.
So would you like me to explain?
About that case, it's important to remember it was 1995.
Nixon was born a male, and at the age of 33 had a sex reassignment surgery, and a few years after wanted to volunteer with us.
1995.
And joined. They came to an interview with our training group, and the facilitator explained Nixon that because the core relations that we have with women, we have peer relationship with women based on our shared experience as born females and raised as girls into womanhood, and we will not train or accept people who did not live their whole life as a female.
Nixon initiated the case, we did not.
And Nixon made a complaint to the Human Rights Tribunal in British Columbia that for many years now, before the new definition, accepted transgender under the criteria of sex. And the Human Rights Tribunal ruled that Rape Relief did discriminate Nixon and awarded them $7,500. Rape Relief took the case to judicial review. The Supreme Court of British Columbia judgment was that the Human Rights Tribunal erred, made a mistake, and Rape Relief has not been discriminating Nixon. And under the freedom of association, we are allowed to organize for the purpose of fighting for equality of oppressed group. We have the permission to define who are the members of our groups are. Nixon appealed to BC Court of Appeal that reinforced the judgment of BC Supreme Court, and agreed that we have not discriminated Nixon, and when Nixon appealed to the Supreme Court of Canada, Supreme Court dismissed it.
We won the case. Nixon still owes us $15 grand.
And in British Columbia, the government passed in one day, there was no room for consultation last year, definitions that include gender identity and gender expression. They were not needed technically because the Human Rights Tribunal did hear cases, and it's true for the Federal Human Rights Tribunal. The Human Rights Tribunal accepted cases of transgender people without those definitions, so they formally have been protected before.
It's for strategizing. It's for being able to gather as a group of women. It's not for hiding. It's for having a beachhead from which to fight. It's women's centers that we already lost. We have to hang on to the centers we still have, which are the rape crisis centers and the transition houses.
Concrete examples that Vancouver Rape Relief has dealt with is a person who was born male, had the privilege that being a male and being a man gave this person. They were a pilot, successful pilot, before choosing to become a woman.
International studies now confirm that it is only in the presence of an autonomous women's movement that policies and practices of the state start to reform. Our purpose as a movement and as an organization within that movement is not to give every woman the choice of which sex she would like to be, or to promote notions that each woman should challenge herself to find or create freedom for herself, alone for herself. These are silly ideas that have come along with neoliberalism. This is not at all what we were.
You know, the second wave feminist movement that began in the late 60s happened because women were able to gather together and talk about their shared experiences of oppression. It was called consciousness raising. And that's why the women's liberation movement started, was because women were able to get together only with other females and talk about what was happening to them in their lives, at work, at home, with their partners, their husbands, etc., their experiences of rape, abuse as women.
Our primary work is to focus on and take down the structures that prevent women from escaping gendered roles and gendered poverty and gendered racism. Those structures that enforce gender with laws, norms, and institutions, including male violence against women. We cannot be talking about the example of transition houses as the one place where we should be allowed to say women only.
It's pivotal. We can't organize. We can't organize as a class of people, as women, as an oppressed class of people, if we can't meet with only other women. And, you know, this is a right that all marginalized groups should have. You know, people of color should be able to meet with just people of color to organize for their rights and their protections, and women should have that right also.
Every single person deserves safety, deserves bodily privacy, and deserves dignity, including trans people. Women are women. Trans 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 women are women.
We are protected, but I also think you are aware of the situation in Vancouver, Senator Jaffar, because we were protected. We have our autonomy, but surely you know the witch hunt that goes against my group. The BC Federation of Labour just instructed all their affiliated unions to boycott Vancouver Rape Relief and Women's Shelters, the oldest rape crisis center in Canada, because even though the Supreme Court of BC agreed that we allow to work only with female-born women, we are deemed to be transphobic.
Somebody find me a TERF, I'm mad and ready to fistfight. I will kill all TERFs with my sword of absolute power. Punch a TERF, y'all. I will punch the shit out of the TERF who reports you. Can somebody lob a brick at the TERF twats? If every TERF on the planet could set themselves on fire, that would be appreciated. I will knock you down with my toothpick body.
Because no, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be bullied into saying that the sun is cold or water is dry. Stand up for yourselves. Don't let people bully you into believing bullshit. Don't let people bully you into agreeing with bullshit that you don't believe because they have some sort of power over you. Like, and I'm feeling some kind of way about that. Like, she felt like she had power over me because she controls my grade, so I was automatically going to back down and should back down. False. I'm just baffled. I'm really baffled that this is where we are in the world now. This is where we are. If you don't conform and, you know, fall in line with the delusion doctrine, it's over for you and you are ostracized. And that is fucking it's McCarthyism and it's ridiculous. And I'm gonna stop now. I'm just gonna stop talking. Okay.
Concept that say that it doesn't matter what sex you were born into, which is really a wonderful concept in theory, completely dismiss the reality of women's oppression.
I don't feel as though I should be called misogynist names, objectified, abused, or sexually harassed, but these things have happened to me anyway.
Stab your local TERF. Step the fuck up and take out the TERF trash, get in their faces, make them afraid. Kill a TERF. I will fuck up a TERF on sight. Oh, it's that kind of oppression where you are constantly threatening to assault women and making them feel afraid to voice their objections. That's actually my favourite kind of oppression, where all the aggression is coming from one side and they're the ones who are apparently the victims.
Rape relief in the crisis line that you operate does work with transgendered individuals, men and women, who call the line. And you mentioned that there's a need for some resources there. Are there other ways that we could be looking at this that might assist in ensuring those resources and supports are available for individuals who are now getting the support through your crisis line?
So, of course, we are human with a heart, and we will never turn away someone who is not safe. We will secure anybody who called us. We will secure safety. But if transgender people are actually interested in the service that rape relief offered to women, then it will be wise to create a service that is designed by transgender people, offered by transgender people, to transgender people. So there is a full understanding of the experience of people's life and relation and support from that place. But in general, we are lacking of services. There are not even enough services to female-born women. We have to turn away so many women all the time, and it's true for other transition houses. So more services to all, and definitely if the legislator want to protect transgender people, there should be designated services for transgender people.
It would be incredibly, I don't want to say triggering because that's all the rage, but I've worked hard to kind of resolve the sexual abuse that I had. And part of that is understanding that I have places where I'm safe. And I know that not all biological men are going to assault me. But if I'm in a place where I feel like I'm vulnerable and then all of a sudden a biological male is there, I'm going to feel really vulnerable.
According to biology, humans are a sexually dimorphic species, with chromosomal anomalies like those of intersex individuals being the exceptions, but not altering the rule. In humans, the rule is XY chromosomes result in primary and secondary sex characteristics such as penises, facial hair, taller stature, etc., and are male. And XX chromosomes result in uteri, the ability to give birth in smaller statues, and are female. In society, an adult human female is called a woman. On that basis, transgender women, aka males, cannot be women. The assertion that we can somehow identify out of our biological realities and become a different sex, including all the socialization that entails having grown up with, does not seem to have much basis in reality. I absolutely agree that cultural competence is critical in social work, and that includes examining the ways male socialization and entitlement perhaps impact trans women who are, in fact, male.
I was sexually abused, and my abuser liked to stand there and watch me in the shower and laugh.
I was sexually assaulted too. Stop scapegoating trans women.
1 in 4 children are sexually abused, generally by people in their own family.
Why is your chairman asking you to
No.
Wasn't by a trans person? No.
And what you are doing with this rhetoric is the same message that many girls and women have received their entire lives. If you do not give me what I want, you are hateful.
This whole thing is just infuriating me so much because it took me almost a lifetime to realize I could set boundaries. And now biological men who say they're women are saying, no, you don't get to set those boundaries. If I want to come into your space where you're vulnerable, I get to come in there. And you're also telling girls that.
The transgender woman is not another woman. She has exactly the same women's status than any of the other women. So that's why I have some problems to say she's less discriminated than.
I don't want to go there. I do not think it's wise to say who is more or less oppressed.
I'm afraid we've run out of time, and I want to thank our witnesses for being here this evening and assisting the committee in its deliberations. Much appreciated. Meeting adjourned.
Biological, truly the shit is factual. Our free speeches are pinnacle, but yet they are so cynical. So I put it in a song. I'm at just what I want. Trans-exclusionary is a misname, I say they are wrong. Sex assigned at birth is stupid. We all know just what the truth is, and if that makes us the biggest, take the L, cause we are losing. Yeah, we're typing and twerking and ready to fight. They're trying to brainwash little children.
Because Julian thinks they're all the same person, I want to see if a picture exists of them together. Sandra Bullock, Julia Roberts, Anne Hathaway.
I don't know who that is, but that is not one of the
Who's the one on the right?
Victoria Beckham.
Okay, go.
Anne Hathaway, Rihanna.
That is not
That's
Anne
Rihanna.
Hathaway.
Oh, Julia Roberts. Are you kidding me? That's are you fuck? Those are two Julia Roberts. You're joking, right? What? Which one is not Julia Roberts? Stop. That's Julia Roberts.
The one on the right is not Julia
Roberts. No, are you serious? I was gonna guess the other way.
Sandra Bullock in a blonde wig.
That is the same person. That's
Who's that?
Anne Hathaway.
Who's that?
Anne Hathaway. Next clue.
Oh, Julian, this is a game.
Oh no! Oh my God! This is my literal hell.
Go ahead.
Julia Roberts on number 1. Julia Roberts number 2.
Yeah.
Anne Hathaway number 3.
Okay.
Anne Hathaway number 4. Julia Roberts number 5.
Okay.
Sandra Bullock number 6. Anne Hathaway number 7. Anne Hathaway number 9. And Julia Roberts number 8.
Actually crying. Julian, look at this. That's an answer.
No! Are you kidding me? No fucking way! There is literally no way that's all Julia Roberts.
They're all Julia Roberts.
The top right one is not Julia Roberts. My head hurts. I have a headache now.
Who's who?
No, stop. I'm gonna puke.